Hey there, folks. This is Uncle Troy. Today we're telling stories. That's right, it's story time with Uncle Troy. So something happened today that was a very, very interesting story. Unfortunately, to really get the context of it, to really understand the whole picture, so to speak, I have to tell several other stories which aren't so interesting, aren't so entertaining, but you're going to have to sit through them anyway. And don't bother trying to click away. I've already disabled your mouse. Okay, this is a story of my first pager. Some of you may remember pagers back in the days before cell phones were very popular. You would get a page. Actually, the very first pagers that I was familiar with, all they did was beep. They didn't tell you what number was calling. They didn't give you any message. When you got a beep on your pager, which was this big thing, about yay big, looked like a half a brick or so. When you got a beep on the pager, you had to call the office and see what the problem was. But later we graduated to what we called voice pagers. And the voice pager was about the size of this right here, I think. And you would put it on your belt. And the voice pager was an analog pager, not a digital pager. So it couldn't, have a little display that showed you numbers. It was a analog device. And what would happen was when someone needed to page you for your business purposes, they would go to a certain console, they would type in your 3-digit number, and then they would speak their message, and a few minutes later it would come across the pager. Now, unfortunately, because it was analog service, and there were many different pagers on the same frequency, to work, the paging device, the radio, basically, sent out an analog broadcast of tones. And the tone sounded something like, dee-dee, 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 dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. And then the speaker would turn on, and you'd get your message. Troy, call the office. Troy, call the office. And the reason why there were so many tones there is that each pager had its own tone to turn on its speaker. Now, unfortunately, if you had a group of people that worked together, say the security office or the maintenance office, they would put them all into groups. And every time you'd want to send a page to Troy and security, instead of just sending, type in Troy's 3-digit number, click, 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 you type in the 3-digit number for the whole group, click, click, click. That way, if Troy didn't get the message, somebody else in security would get the message. And as I was the newest person to get a pager, I got the most recent pager. And when they punched it into the group, it ended up at the top of the list. So my tones to turn on my pager went out first. So then I heard then it heard the tones, so my pager turned the speaker on. So then the tones for all the other people in the group went out, and then finally the message came across. And yes, that was annoying, because the tones when they went out, dee 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 dee. And after all these years, I still remember those tones because they were darned annoying and loud as heck. So what I would take to doing is, when I got my pager, I'd stick it in my coat pocket. I'd stick it in my back pocket, and I had these big clodhopper boots I was wearing at the time, and actually they were a bit taller than these. And what I would do is I would clip the pager to the top of the boot, and then just put my pants leg down over top of it, and that would muffle the sound. And after all the dee 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 stopped, then I would lift my pants leg up a little so I could hear the actual message. Now, this was particularly annoying because sometimes I'd work out in a big parking garage and it echoed. So you'd hear dee 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 dee. And about the time the message would start, you'd hear echoing off the far end of the parking garage, dee 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 dee. Very annoying. So, and I also worked a really weird shift. I worked 8:30 at night till 8:30 in the morning, 12-hour shifts. And so at 8:30 in the morning, about the time everybody else is coming in, the day shift people are coming in, then I get to go home. So at the end of a long night of working and listening to that stupid dee 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 all night long, then I finally get to go home. I pile my old 73 Oldsmobile Delta 88 with the 350 cubic inch engine and the glass pack mufflers. When you start it up, the whole parking lot vibrates. That was always fun, watching people say. So I'd start heading home. It was about a half hour, 45-minute drive. And so I'd leave the leave office about 8:30. About 9 o'clock, I'd cross the county line, and the sun would come up over the mountain. And it would be bright. And, of course, you'd think, been up all night in the morning, you're a little tired. You'd think a bright light shining in your face would wake you right up. Not at all. The warm glow of the sun, and you kind of have to squint to see where you're going, and all you got is your eyes are mostly closed, and the warm glow of the sun, and the next thing you know, you're, ugh. So every morning about 9 o'clock, I'd have to stop down at the local convenience store and get me a cup of coffee. Now, I don't normally drink coffee. I don't normally pronounce it as coffee. But a guy I went to school with worked at that convenience store. And I'd come in. And the guy grew up same place I did. Okay, went to school with me. And for all the redneck, nasally twang I've got and the occasional, use of words that aren't, technically part of the English language, he was twice that bad. In spite of that, when I would come in the morning, he would say, "Hey, Troy, would you like some coffee?" And I never really figured out if he was like making fun of me, if he was, that was just his thing he did or whatever. But yes, I would have some coffee. Actually, most of the time he'd say, "Hey, Troy, would you like some coffee?" And I would say, "No, I would not like some coffee. I hate coffee. Coffee is oily and bitter. It makes my head spin. It makes me all jittery. I'm still tired. I'm just tired in tight little circles." But I would get me some coffee, and usually about the time I drank maybe half of it, I wouldn't be able to hold the cup anymore. I'd be like this. So, driving home, sun comes up, I have to stop and get coffee, drink about half of it, and now I'm awake, and I'm jittery, and I can't close my eyes, but I'm still really, really tired. So I get back in the car, start driving the rest of the way home, and about the time I pull into my driveway, I hear dee 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 dee. Troy, bring the pager back. Troy, bring the pager back. And I'd have to turn around and go right back to work, hand off the pager, then go home. Then I couldn't sleep because coming back home, the sun's still shining in my face. I still get kind of drowsy again. I'd have to stop and drink another half a cup of coffee. Anyway, so that was how I used to have a pager, which I swear was about this big. When they finally got numeric pagers, I thought that was a great thing because you could actually dial up a phone number, type in your phone number, hit star or pound or whatever you're supposed to do until you finished. It would come across on the pager, a little display. 555, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. But unfortunately, people decided that did not have the same range as the voices. You did not have the same options, same abilities, however you want to say it. Basically, it was limited to just numbers. So we started coming up with special codes. So if they needed you to call someplace stat, immediately, there'd be a little 911 before or after the code or the phone number, which really sucked if they didn't punch in the number right, because if you typed in just your 7 digits of your phone number, it would try to format them, I guess is to say. And instead of just being, blah, 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 it'd try to be 555 dash, and it tried to do that automatically. Well, the problem was if you tried to enter your number and then say 911, it would see, instead of 7 digits, it would see 10 digits, and it would think there was an area code in there somewhere. So your number might come through something like 555 dash, the actual number, 1, 2, 3, 4, except it would go 1, 2, 3, break, 4, 911. And of course, trying to explain to people, you got to hit the, I think it was the star key, the asterisk, something like that. Yeah. Y'all can't see where I pointed. Don't know why I did that. But we'd end up with, garbled pages, and then they'd get confused. And, of course, they also seem to think, somebody told them somewhere that if you hit the 0 key about 3 times, it would clear the message. Or held down the 0 key. So if you start typing in your phone number and you make a mistake, well, hold the 0 key a couple of seconds, and then type in your actual number. Unfortunately, the thing would only display like 12 digits, So, we'd get like 555 something, 0000, and then nothing, because the rest of it got rolled over. So that didn't work very well. And eventually we ended up with what we called alpha pagers, where you could sit down at a computer, type in your message, it would come across pretty much as it was typed, except that certain characters, certain punctuation marks and whatnot didn't come through, so they'd come through as weird flashing characters. And the other thing was, if there was any type of, shall I say, signal noise, transmission error, then you would end up with some kind of gobbledygook. Troy, please come to room, blah, blah, blah. That was a lot of fun. So eventually they got what we figured, okay, well, we'd end up having to call around and say, okay, who paged us? Who sent the alpha page? What do you really need? So they said, well, that's taken too long. I said, this is back before cell phones were popular. So they looked into what they called two-way alpha pagers, which would allow you to send messages from one pager to another on a little keypad. Now, by little, I mean the alpha pager was about this size, about the size of the old voice pager, but it had a keypad and a thing, and you were able to. And basically, it was text messaging, but through regular radio waves, not cell phone. And we was like really looking forward to those, and then they decided, no, that was too much money. Let's just go back to the plain numeric pagers. So we went from voice to numeric to alphanumeric to two-way alphanumeric to back to plain old numeric pages. And that one just went dee 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 dee. And yes, there were some mornings when I'd be driving home, sun shining in my face, about to go to sleep, and I'd hear dee 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 dee. And I would look, and it would be the number to the office. And instead of calling, I would just turn around, drive back to work.